Every time you justify yourself, you bleed power silently. People see uncertainty, not strength. Your words betray you. Silence alone signals dominance, control, and untouchable authority. Chapter 1. The Trap of Explanation. You were trained to believe that clarity creates respect, that if you explain yourself well enough, people will understand you, trust you, and treat you fairly. That belief is the first weakness you were given. In reality, explanation is not a neutral act, it is a submission ritual. The moment you explain yourself, you implicitly accept that someone else has the authority to judge your decisions. You place yourself below them in the hierarchy, even if only for a second. Power does not live in those seconds. Power is decided there. Look closely at how explanations actually function in social dynamics. When you justify your actions, you are not adding information, you are asking for permission retroactively. You are signaling that your decision was incomplete without external approval. That signal is never missed. Strong figures do not explain because they do not need to. Their position justifies itself. Weak figures explain constantly because they're trying to repair a status gap they can feel but cannot name. This is why explanations rarely satisfy. Have you noticed that the more you explain, the more questions you receive? That is not curiosity, that is dominance testing. Each follow-up question is a probe, a way for the listener to step deeper into authority over you. You opened the door the moment you began defending your reasoning. Explanation also collapses mystery, and mystery is one of the oldest currencies of power. When everything about you is clear, articulated, and transparent, you become predictable. Predictability makes you manageable. Manageable people are never respected. They are used. Historically, rulers understood this instinctively. Kings did not issue press statements. Generals did not justify strategies to soldiers. Judges did not explain themselves to defendants. The explanation flowed downward, never upward. The direction matters. When you explain yourself to equals, you turn them into superiors. When you explain yourself to subordinates, you erase the structure that protects you. In both cases, you lose leverage. The most dangerous part is that explanation feels moral. It feels polite. It feels cooperative. That is why it works as a trap. Society rewards visible compliance, not silent authority. You are encouraged to speak, clarify, soften, and rationalize because those behaviors make you easier to control. Silence, on the other hand, creates psychological pressure. When you do not explain, the other person is forced to fill the gap themselves. Humans hate ambiguity. They will resolve it in ways that often benefit the one who remains quiet. They assume confidence. They assume certainty. They assume power. This is the lens shift you must accept. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be positioned correctly. Understanding is optional. Position is everything. Once you grasp this, you stop asking, "How do I explain this better?" and start asking, "Why do they feel entitled to an explanation at all?" That question alone changes how you move through the world. Chapter 2. Psychological Mechanism, Power Leakage. Power rarely disappears all at once. It leaks, quietly, invisibly, and explanation is one of its most efficient escape routes. Every social interaction contains an unspoken negotiation. Who is evaluating whom? The person doing the explaining is almost never the one in control of that negotiation. The explainer is reacting. The listener is assessing. That asymmetry is the mechanism. When you explain yourself, your brain shifts into a defensive posture. Defensiveness narrows perception. It speeds speech, softens tone, adds qualifiers. You begin stacking reasons, context, intentions. Each addition feels like clarification, but psychologically it reads as uncertainty. Humans are wired to associate certainty with leadership and hesitation with weakness. This is not a moral judgment, it is a survival algorithm. In primate hierarchies, dominant figures do not justify movement, they move, others adjust. When a lower status member over-signals intent or reason, it is an appeasement behavior, a way to avoid conflict by proving harmlessness. Modern explanation follows the same ancient pattern. You are signaling, I am not a threat. The listener feels this instantly, even if unconsciously. Once they sense non-threat, their behavior changes. They interrupt more. They question motives. They feel licensed to disagree, probe, or correct you. You interpret this as dialogue. In reality, it is extraction. They are pulling certainty out of you while giving nothing back. Another critical mechanism is narrative control. When you explain, you surrender authorship of the story. You hand raw material to the other person and allow them to interpret, distort, or weaponize it. They can agree publicly and undermine you privately. They can quote fragments out of context. They can reframe your intentions without resistance. Silence denies them this leverage. Explanation also collapses mystery, and mystery is one of the oldest currencies of power. When everything about you is clear, articulated, and transparent, you become predictable. Predictability makes you manageable. Manageable people are never respected. They are used. Historically, rulers understood this instinctively. Kings did not issue press statements. Generals did not justify strategies to soldiers. Judges did not explain themselves to defendants. The explanation flowed downward, never upward. The direction matters. When you explain yourself to equals, you turn them into superiors. When you explain yourself to subordinates, you erase the structure that protects you. In both cases, you lose leverage. The most dangerous part is that explanation feels moral. It feels polite. It feels cooperative. That is why it works as a trap. Society rewards visible compliance, not silent authority. You are encouraged to speak, clarify, soften, and rationalize because those behaviors make you easier to control. Silence, on the other hand, creates psychological pressure. When you do not explain, the other person is forced to fill the gap themselves. Humans hate ambiguity. They will resolve it in ways that often benefit the one who remains quiet. They assume confidence. They assume certainty. They assume power. This is the lens shift you must accept. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be positioned correctly. Understanding is optional. Position is everything. Once you grasp this, you stop asking, how do I explain this better? And start asking, why do they feel entitled to an explanation at all? That question alone changes how you move through the world.
Chapter 3. Archetypes: the justifier versus the silent. Every social environment produces the same two archetypes. They wear different faces, hold different titles, but their behavior is consistent across cultures and centuries: the justifier and the silent. The justifier believes power comes from being correct, from having reasons ready, from explaining intentions before they are misunderstood. He fills gaps preemptively, thinking this protects him. In reality, it marks him. The justifier speaks quickly. He clarifies unasked questions. He softens statements with context. He explains decisions even when no challenge has been issued. This is not confidence. It is anticipatory defense. He is negotiating acceptance before resistance appears. Others sense this immediately. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. The justifier is safe to question, safe to interrupt, safe to pressure. He becomes the person people push, not aggressively, but persistently. His boundaries are elastic because he keeps explaining them. Then there is the silent. The silent does not rush to fill space. He allows pauses to exist. He answers only what is asked, and sometimes not even that. He does not justify actions. He lets outcomes speak. His words are fewer, but each one lands heavier because it is not diluted. The silent understands something the justifier does not. Attention follows restraint. When the silent speaks, others listen harder. When he doesn't, they speculate. Speculation inflates perceived depth. People assume there is more beneath the surface because they cannot access it easily. This assumption alone elevates status. Look at how groups respond to each archetype. The justifier is included, but rarely deferred to. He's consulted, but not followed. His openness invites collaboration, but kills authority. The silent, however, attracts alignment. People adjust around him without being asked. This is not charisma, it is structure. The justifier's greatest mistake is believing that transparency builds trust. Transparency builds familiarity. Familiarity reduces hierarchy. Once hierarchy collapses, respect becomes optional. People treat you as equals, and equals challenge, negotiate, and resist. The silent preserves distance. Distance maintains hierarchy. Hierarchy creates gravity. You will notice that powerful figures often appear calm, even dull. They are not performing intelligence, they are conserving it. Their silence forces others to project meaning onto them. Those projections often favor strength. There is also a darker layer. The silent is harder to manipulate. Without verbal data, attackers cannot predict reactions. Without explanations, they cannot corner logic. Without admissions, they cannot build moral leverage. The silent becomes slippery, not evasive, but unreadable. The justifier, meanwhile, leaves a trail. Each explanation is a footprint. Over time, those footprints form a map, and maps are used by those who want control. The shift from the justifier to the silent is not about becoming cold for show. It is about choosing which archetype survives longer in competitive environments. One is endlessly understood and quietly dominated. The other is rarely understood and consistently respected. Once you recognize which role you've been playing, you can no longer unsee it. Chapter 4. Deepening the Threat. History, Human Nature, and Exposure. If explanation were harmless, history would reward those who used it most. It doesn't. History punishes them first. Every purge, every betrayal, every political execution begins the same way. Someone explains themselves to the wrong audience. They believe reason will protect them. They believe clarity equals safety. It never does. In courts, councils, and regimes, the moment a figure begins defending intentions, suspicion has already formed. Explanation does not dissolve suspicion, it confirms vulnerability. Accusations grow sharper because the target has revealed where pressure works. Machiavelli observed this pattern repeatedly. Princes who justified decisions invited resistance. Princes who acted decisively and spoke sparingly discouraged it.
Silence created uncertainty. Uncertainty slowed opposition. In power struggles, delay is often victory. Human nature responds to confidence, not correctness. People follow those who appear certain even when wrong, and abandon those who are right but uncertain. Explanation introduces uncertainty because it exposes internal debate. It reveals alternatives existed and were weighed. That alone weakens authority. This is why public apologies, justifications, and overclarifications backfire. The speaker believes humility will soften judgment. Instead, observers feel licensed to escalate. If you explain once, they expect explanation again. Each time, the threshold lowers. Explanation also weaponizes morality against you. Once you justify your actions ethically, others can reframe them ethically. You step onto their battlefield. Now the conflict is no longer about results or position, it's about virtue. Virtue debates never end, and they always favor the accuser. Silence avoids this trap. Silence keeps the conflict on structural terms. This happened, and it stands. There is nothing to dissect, nothing to reinterpret. History is full of leaders who spoke themselves into exile, disgrace, or execution, not because they were wrong, but because they explained too much to people who were never listening in good faith. The same dynamic plays out on a smaller scale today. In workplaces, relationships, social circles, and online spaces, explanation is extracted as a form of dominance. The more you give, the more is demanded. Eventually, your position erodes until you are defending existence itself. You must understand this clearly. Most explanations are not requested for understanding, but for leverage. People ask why to locate pressure points. They ask for clarity to find inconsistencies. They ask for context to measure how far they can push. Once they have that information, the tone changes. The threat is not confrontation. The threat is exposure. When your reasoning is public, it can be judged, mocked, reframed, or stored for later use. When it is private, you retain optionality. You can adapt without contradiction. You can move without apology. This is why disciplined figures throughout history cultivated restraint. Monks, generals, kings, strategists, all understood that speech is a liability when used carelessly. Silence is not passive, it is defensive architecture. Those who fail to build it are eventually overrun. Chapter 5. Strategic Response. The Art of Silence. Once you understand that explanation leaks power, the next mistake is overcorrecting. Silence is not muteness, it is selective release. Used improperly, it makes you look evasive. Used correctly, it restructures the entire interaction in your favor. The first shift is internal. You must kill the reflex to clarify. That reflex was conditioned into you by school, work culture, social norms. You were trained to respond quickly, to justify, to be cooperative. Silence feels wrong at first because it denies others emotional reassurance. That discomfort is not danger, it is withdrawal from approval. When someone challenges you, do not rush to explain. Pause. Let the silence stretch just long enough to destabilize their expectation. Humans are uncomfortable when scripts break. In that pause, the power dynamic begins to tilt. They spoke. You did not react. You are no longer chasing equilibrium. They are. Next, compress your responses. Replace explanations with statements. Not defensive statements, declarative ones. Fewer words, fewer openings. Every extra sentence is an invitation. Close the door early. If pressed for justification, redirect without engaging the premise. You are not required to accept every frame presented to you. When you answer why, you concede authority. Instead, answer what or when, or don't answer at all. Control the axis of the conversation. You will notice resistance. People accustomed to extracting explanations will push harder. This is the test. If you collapse here, the lesson is reinforced in them. Pressure works. If you hold, something else happens. They recalibrate. Either they respect the boundary or they expose their intent. Both outcomes benefit you. Another strategic layer is delayed speech. Powerful individuals rarely respond immediately. Time itself becomes a filter. Urgency belongs to those without leverage. When you take time, you signal independence. You show that your attention is not freely available. Silence also allows others to overplay their hand. In the absence of your reasoning, they reveal theirs. They talk more. They justify themselves. They fill the void you refused to occupy. This reversal is subtle but decisive. You must also learn situational silence. Not every environment rewards it equally. Public spaces, negotiations, group dynamics, silence amplifies authority there. Private, intimate contexts may require calibrated explanation. Power is contextual. Strategy is knowing when to deploy which tool. The goal is not to become unreadable to everyone. The goal is to be unreadable to those who would use clarity against you. Finally, accept the cost. Silence will make some people uncomfortable. Some will label you arrogant, cold, or difficult. These labels come from those who lost access. That is not a signal to explain. It is confirmation that the boundary is working. Power is not loud. Power does not persuade. Power positions itself and lets others adjust. Once you master silence as a strategy, you stop reacting to pressure and start generating it.
Chapter 6: Identity Death and Replacement. At some point, technique is no longer enough. You can practice silence, compress speech, delay responses, but if the old identity is still alive underneath, it will resurface under pressure. This chapter is where that identity dies. The identity that must be destroyed is the one that believes being understood is safety. That identity was shaped early. It learned that explanations reduced punishment, avoided conflict, earned approval. It associates silence with danger. As long as that association exists, you will break when stakes rise. Power requires a different internal contract. You must replace the need to be understood with the need to be unmovable. This is not emotional numbness, it is hierarchy awareness. You stop measuring interactions by comfort and start measuring them by position. You no longer ask, "Did they get me?" You ask, "Did I move up, stay stable, or leak ground?" The new identity understands something brutal but accurate. Most people do not want truth, they want leverage. Once you accept this, explanation becomes a liability, not a virtue. You will feel the withdrawal symptoms. The urge to clarify will flare when you are misunderstood, when someone mislabels your intent, when silence costs you short-term approval. This is the test phase. If you survive it, something changes permanently. People begin to treat you differently. They choose words more carefully around you. They hesitate before challenging you. They read into your pauses. They project authority onto you without being asked. This is not because you became aggressive, it's because you stopped leaking yourself. The replacement identity does not explain emotions, motives, or decisions by default. It understands that justification is a privilege you grant, not a debt you owe. When you do explain, it is intentional, strategic, and limited. This identity is harder to access, harder to categorize, harder to manipulate. And because humans fear what they cannot read, they respect it. You are no longer trying to control outcomes through persuasion. You are controlling them through positioning. You let others overextend. You let them reveal themselves. You let silence do the work your old identity tried to do with words. This is the final shift. You stop living as a participant begging for fair judgment and start living as a fixed point others must orient around. Once this identity locks in, you cannot go back. Explaining will feel unnatural. Oversharing will feel dangerous. Silence will feel like home. This is not growth, it is replacement. Chapter 7. Final Warning. This is the last thing you need to understand, and it is the most dangerous. Silence does not make you invisible. It makes you selective. Once you stop explaining yourself, you will notice something unsettling. Not everyone stays. Some people grow distant. Some become hostile. Some suddenly accuse you of changing. You didn't change. You withdrew access. Those reactions are diagnostic. People who benefited from your explanations will feel exposed without them. They relied on your clarity to position themselves above you, to predict you, to manage you. When that supply disappears, they reveal their dependence through pressure, guilt, or moral language. This is why silence must be paired with resolute. If you break under accusation, if you rush to justify yourself to repair comfort, you teach them that resistance works. They will escalate next time. Power is maintained by consistency. Understand this clearly. You will be misunderstood on purpose. Silence invites projection. Some of those projections will be negative. That is the price of authority. Leaders, strategists, and sovereign figures throughout history accepted this cost because the alternative was submission. The elite do not correct every false narrative. They choose which ones matter. Everything else is noise. Your final task is simple but unforgiving. Stop explaining to those who have not earned explanation. Let results speak. Let structure speak. Let silence force others to adjust. This is not advice for everyone. Most people cannot tolerate the isolation, the tension, the loss of approval. They will retreat back to justification because it feels safe. That is why this knowledge separates. If you apply it, you will move differently. If you abandon it, you will be absorbed back into the hierarchy you escaped. Choose carefully. Silence remembers.